Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to one of the last sessions. The name of our session is not the 9 o'clock news. So we won't be screaming, shouting, or otherwise trying to overwhelm you. We have some thoughtful people here, a panel that will take you on a seriously calm ride. We'll talk about democracy, society, the environment, and try to get a grip on some of the most burning contemporary issues. The big issues today, as I see them, I think the number one would be the after effects of globalization and the people who got left behind, the kind of people who helped elect Donald Trump. Then we have something like income inequality, the ideological prisons on the left and the right, the politics of hate, the rise of racism in the West, and the rise of communalism in India. Then we have the Me Too movement. We have issues of immigration and identity. A much talked about Oxfam study released just as the participants were arriving in Davos showed that 82% of the wealth generated last year went to the richest 1% of the global population. In India, in 2017 alone, the top 1% of the population owned 73% of the addition to the wealth that was generated. A year ago, the top 1% owned 58% of the wealth. This year's Edelman Trust Barometer Index, which is a measure of the levels of trust in societies, it was released this week, and it showed steep falls in trust in many countries, especially in the United States, which saw a 37-point drop in trust across all institutions. Trust has taken a big hit because governments have failed to deliver on the promise of better lives through globalization and free trade. Lamentably, the study also found that the media is now ranked as the least trusted institution globally, distrusted in 22 of the 28 countries that were surveyed. Nearly 7 in 10 respondents among the general public say they're concerned about fake news being used as a weapon, and 59% say it's getting harder to tell if a news item is fake or real and produced by a respected media organization. The electorate is disillusioned, it's preoccupied. In such a climate, democracies across Europe, Asia, and North America have seen a rise of nationalism. Nationalism is something that begins with populism, that masquerades as patriotism, and then it morphs into something less attractive, shall we say. This is not theoretical. In many countries, it's a reality. In others, a clear and present danger. Is democracy in retreat, suffocated by its own qualities? So these are some of the sort of broad questions I thought of that we can discuss. Very quickly, a brief introduction of our panelist, Matt Frei. He's a presenter at Channel 4 News and the Europe editor. He has documented the very interesting world of Donald Trump, and he has covered Barack Obama. He did an interesting program called Americana, which brought a slice of life to his audiences from all 50 states that make up the United States. He's interviewed Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Aung San Suu Kyi, and he's the author of a book called Only in America. Then we have Sujatha Gidla on my extreme right. She's the author of Ants Among Elephants, the book that has taken America by storm. It's listed by the Wall Street Journal as among the top 10 nonfiction books of 2017. The book is an unflinching and visceral account of India's caste system. Sujatha has said, your life is your caste and your caste is your life. Sometimes I liken India's caste system to race relations in the United States. The persistence of both in 21st century is a very sobering reality. It's as if, we didn't progress with civilization. Then we have, on my left, Odd Harald Hauge. He's a former journalist from Norway. He has worked as a stockbroker, entrepreneur, and has written many books. For fun, he takes walks on the South Pole and a hike on the Everest. By the way, he's actually climbed the Everest. And when he's really bored, he writes crime novels. He owns a restaurant in the northernmost part of the world. On my right, I have Pavan Varma. He wears many hats and wears them with such style. He is a diplomat, a writer, a politician, and author of many best-selling books. I've known Pavan for a long time, and I've always been struck by his elegance and grace. So I really want to know what bothers him the most. Then, last but not the least, we have Ruchira Gupta. She's a feminist and has fought hard to bring attention to the issue of sex trafficking and worked harder to end it. I remember watching her documentary, The Selling of Innocence, many years ago. And she's gone from strength to strength. She's founded a group called Apne Aap, Women Worldwide, which gives voice to the voiceless. She works with many governments and has won many awards, including an Emmy. So what we're going to do is ask each one of our panelists to describe the most important and burning issue that they think that the media are not covering properly. So maybe we'll start with Matt, go to Sujatha, Odd, Ruchira, and then Pavan.
Well, thank you very much. That's a terrifyingly open question to start off with. There are loads of things that we don't cover on television, even in a program like mine, Channel 4 News, which prides itself on doing in-depth reporting. Partly because there's so much news around, but also because as we cover the daily minutiae of politics or economics or society, we don't stand back enough to give us the bigger picture. So let me try and give you what I think is the bigger picture, and this is a very subjective view, which most of you will disagree with, but this is what I'm thinking of under the tent on a hot afternoon in Jaipur. And it is this, that although there are reasons to be depressed about the withdrawal of democracy, freedom of the press, the rise of nationalism, in many societies where we thought they had gone away forever, on the whole, we're in a pretty good state. Planet Earth in terms of prosperity, openness of societies, the spread of democracy, until recently, that was the upward trajectory. That's where we thought we were heading. And now we've reached a roadblock, and we have to ask ourselves, is this in serious retreat, or is it something that we can still take for granted? And I think we shouldn't despair, but we should ask ourselves what we need to do in order to keep going in the right direction. And I think the right direction is, mutual respect for each other, either as nation states or individual citizens, a rule of law, an independent judiciary, all the stuff that we thought was obvious that is now being tackled in so many countries where we thought that ground had been captured. Why is this happening? It's happening, I think, because we are living in an era of great disruption caused mainly by the internet. The internet is having the same impact on our societies as the printing press did on European societies in the 15th and 16th century. And why the internet? Because the internet gives each and every one of us who has access to a mobile phone or a computer or a tablet. And that is increasingly the case even in countries that are not particularly wealthy. In a window on the world. It empowers you with information, the likes of which you could not have dreamt of. The world that was for an Indian villager until 20 years ago, his village, and maybe a few surrounding areas, is now the world. You have access to all of it. And that causes disruption. It causes disruption because it allows you to question all the other given forms of information. It allows you to form new tribes online. You can reinforce your prejudices, your beliefs, whether they're religious or political or social, with your crowd online. So ghettoization of information, this is important stuff. This is what is undermining American democracy at the moment. And crucially, and finally, it allows you more than ever before to compare. You can compare your life to someone else's life, but you also know that your ability to change your life is strictly limited. And so the big division today, I don't think is religious or provincial versus rural. It is between those of us who are intimidated by this globalization of information and economics, and those of us who are not. The mobile and the immobile, the left behind and the moving.
Okay, very good. So, Sujatha, would you like to come in now with what you think is the most important issue for you?
Actually, you know, there are so many things happening in the world that it's hard to say that this is what is burning question for me. I mean, I was born an untouchable and caste is an important thing, but on the other hand, there are so many other oppressions that I would think in India, Muslims are in danger of being wiped out, and it's urgent that progressive people must address the question of anti-Muslim assaults on Indian Muslims, and that's very important.
So, I mean, do you think to use the word wiped out, do you think it's a bit of an hyperbole?
No, I don't think it's hyperbole because it happened in Europe with the Jewish people, and it's happening in Burma with the Rohingya. And so, I mean, Muslims don't play any special role that makes them indispensable for Indian society. And so, if they are indispensable, then they would. So they are being in the danger of being wiped out. It's very urgent for Indian progressive people to come to the defense of Muslims being attacked as part of anti-beef thing, and also in Kashmir for the right to self-determination.
Yes, okay. Odd, would you like to say something about your issue?
Yeah, I'm coming from the peaceful corner of Scandinavia, but even there we have problems. There are no lack of problems. But I would point out something that affects everyone, rich and poor, every country, and that is climate change. There is no lack of information and news about climate change, but there is very little on the solution. Next year it's 50 years since man walked on the moon. It was in an age without computers, but they still managed. And in 2018, we still can't solve such a simple problem as climate change. This is not unsolvable. And it's not down to every one of you taking a bike to the grocery or recircling the newspaper. That was the focus from media 10 years ago, and it pissed people off. Because what each and one of us does will not help. The solution is on a higher level. And to be frank, it's very easy to solve.
Okay, so is it lack of political will?
Yes, it's lack of political will. No one wants to take the bill for it. But and there's a lot of discussion on whether this is happening or not. But the risk comprises of two factors, probability and consequence. So if consequence is high, the probability doesn't need to be very high. That's why you have insurance on your homes. You never heard about any fire in your neighbor or anyone you know, but you still have insurance. So why don't we buy this insurance on climate change? It's stupid.
That's a very good point. Ruchira?
I would tend to agree with what Sujatha has said, that one of the biggest and most urgent issues is the intolerance, the marginalization of people constantly, sometimes because they are Muslims, sometimes because they are women, sometimes because they are Dalits, and there is these intersecting oppressions and intersecting inequalities and a deliberate way of expanding this inequality to make the rich richer, the poor poorer, to make men more powerful, women less powerful, to make upper caste more landed, and the people who are the most destitute, the Dalits, less landed, and of course what's happening to Muslims. And where I work inside the brothels of India, in the red light districts of Bihar, Kolkata, Delhi, Mumbai, and among caste communities suffering from intergenerational prostitution. Those people are completely invisible and beyond the pale. And people sitting in Delhi's South Block and the Prime Minister's office don't even know them, let alone know how to create policies for them. So what I see is a constant erosion of just budgets, just policies which should be sent to provide for the basic needs of people who are the most destitute, who are the most marginalized, and therefore the most vulnerable. For me, she's that 13-year-old girl in a brothel who is not just poor, not just female, not just low caste, but she's also a teenager. And because of all her intersecting inequalities, she is the one who is cut off from access to food. She's given less food than her brother when growing up. She might be given no food at all if her family is very poor, maybe eating one meal in 3 days. She's also cut off from access to education because she may have to be sent to work as a domestic worker in domestic servitude, sold into prostitution as a child prostitute, or work with her parents who are also bonded labor in the farms of India. And just last year, the BJP government actually passed a law, 2016, not 2017, to legalize child labor in audiovisual entertainment and family-based enterprises, which actually led to 80% of India's child labor getting legalized, because most of the child labor in India works along with their parents in family-based enterprises, parents who themselves are poor, low caste. And these little girls are then sucked into doing what their parents do, and they don't have a future. So for me, that 13-year-old girl in a brothel who represents 3 million other girls like her who are trapped in brothels all over India, and the 27 million others all over the world who are also trapped in systems of prostitution because they are black, because they are from minority groups, because they are from indigenous groups which are marginalized, because they are fleeing from war, because they are refugees, and on top of that, of course, they are female and poor. Okay. So for me, this is the most burning issue of our time, that how are we going to address inequality and intolerance?
Right. Okay, Pavan. Bring it all together for us.
No, first of all, the question that I think is a burning question, at least from an Indian context. Why are we discussing the fact that not the 9 o'clock news at 4 in the afternoon? There's a reason for it. Because there has been a considerable and verifiable erosion of the quality of debate that we see in the 9 o'clock news.
Right. You can say that again.
And as a participant and a victim of those debates, I can tell you that one of the most unfortunate developments within so much of which we can be proud of in India is the dumbing down of debate. Samvad ka star, the manner in which we discuss issues, what you are seeing at prime time on television in India is not the discussion of issues with the traditional nuances, sophistication, cerebral concentration, or intellectual insight that has been the tradition of debates in India. And incidentally, I want to say to you that this erosion is not on a monthly basis. It's on a daily basis now. I mean, it is happening in a sense that, for instance, some of the important issues that were raised here today. First of all, 9 o'clock news is not interested in them because of TRP ratings. You want to discuss the issue which is breaking news. And if it's not breaking enough, you keep flashing it many times as breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. So finally that becomes the news, and every channel is competing then to discuss that particular issue, which could be momentary, which could be superficial, which could be only the news of that day, rather than many substantive things in our country. For instance, if India falls in the global hunger index by 24 points or even more, which means 7 out of 10 people are going hungry to bed at night. It will not make it to the 9 o'clock news, and if you mention it, depending on the bias of the anchor, he'll say, but we have gone up 20 points, 30 points on the ease of doing business. So, there's no discussion. It becomes, I spoke last. So, I'll take another minute. So, it becomes a situation where several things are happening. First of all, somewhere in our media, because of corporate ownership, there is now a co-option by which channels themselves have become exceptionally polarized. It is such a brittle debate now, such a polarity between black and white, that it's impossible to discuss a subject with depth and nuance anymore. And it is something that should worry, as I said, especially Indians. Secondly, all the issues that are less glamorous never make it.
Yes.
Women's empowerment, the condition of the Dalits, what is happening with minorities and why, the rise of ultra-nationalism, and what it does to the debate, and what it does to deflect attention from real issues. All of these are issues which cannot anymore be discussed in a sane, civilized, balanced manner on television, and certainly not at 9 o'clock. You can do it at 4 o'clock at the JLF, but not at 9 o'clock news in India, and all of us must start thinking why this has happened.
This is not to defend the shouting that goes on Indian television channels. I think it's happening even in America. The complete polarization, if you listen to CNN, it's completely anti-Trump. If you listen to Fox, they're completely pro-Trump, and there's no perspective of even objectivity. So it's a disease that's sort of spread everywhere. But I think Odd wants to say something here.
Yes. In democratic societies, people in power are always complaining about the media. And as long as they do that, it's a very good sign.
Yes, touché. Matt?
I couldn't agree more with you that the 9 o'clock news is finished. I mean, ours is on at 7 o'clock. We are literally holding on to every single individual viewer by the scruff of their neck. But they're heading in the opposite direction. I've got 4 children. Unless I force them, or my wife forces them to watch the television news, they're not going to watch any TV. They're just going to watch stuff on their iPad or their iPhone. Mostly their iPhone, actually. And they consume the news that interests them, but they will not sit down to consume a diet of news that they weren't told about.
So
that's important.
Right.
So they get deep knowledge about some subjects, Kim Kardashian, for instance, a few other things, and also serious stuff. I'm not making light of the fact they're not interested, but they're never going to be, unless they're interested in the Rohingyas, they're not going to be looking at that as an issue.
So would you say the consensus on what is news is completely broken?
I think it is broken, but here's the good news. And this is not good news for television, people like me, because our industry, at a fixed time of day, which is what advertisers want to know, with a certain audience that they can define, that model is gone. But the good news is that people are getting their information through lots of other sources. I mean, Look at this festival. This is full of really serious debate. We have, what, 35,000 people turning up on Friday? A lot of them here to see a Bollywood star. But, you know, he was asked serious issues and he talked about them. This is great news. Some of the stuff that will be from this festival, that will be on the internet, will be seen by 3-4 million people.
So what do we do? The question becomes, what do we do to focus attention on the big issues that you've talked about? Because if you say the internet will take care of it, I think it's too diffused. You know, your kids might look at one website, they might be informed about Kim Kardashian, but not the Rohingyas or the Dalits or sex trafficking or whatever.
No, well, just to be fair to my children here, because they're going to, I have to go and face them. I'm sorry, kids, if you're watching this, I love you very much and I respect you, and they are interested in all these other issues. What I'm saying is that unless some of their friends tell them about it, they're never ever going to sit down for 1 hour or half an hour and be told about things that they aren't naturally interested in or their friends aren't interested in. So somehow we have to get that information out there. But it can be done. And actually the internet is the perfect way to do it.
सीमा जी, मुझे एक चीज़ और कहना है कि 9 o'clock न्यूज़ तो बहुत अहम है हमारे लिए, पर आजकल एक ऐसा जनरेशन है जो 9 बजे का न्यूज़ नहीं देख रहा है और व्हाट्सएप से उनको बहुत जगह न्यूज़ मिल रही है। जैसे मैं फारबिसगंज बिहार से हूँ और वहाँ पर बहुत लोग न्यूज़ नहीं देखते, बिजली भी नहीं रहती है, पर व्हाट्सएप के ज़रिए से एक तरह की खबर पहुँचती रहती है दिन रात, और वो जो खबर है वो झूठी भी होती है, वेरीफाइड भी नहीं होती है, पर आजकल उसका इन्फ्लुएंस बहुत ज़्यादा है और उसका इन्फ्लुएंस उन लोगों के बीच में है जिनके पास व्हाट्सएप है, जिनके पास फ़ोन है, डेटा प्लान्स है। और मुझे लगता है कि हमें व्हाट्सएप की इन्फ्लुएंस को भी एग्जामिन करना चाहिए जब हम न्यूज़ के बारे में बात करते हैं कि एक डिजिटल डिवाइड भी क्रिएट हो रही है। जिन लोगों के पास फ़ोन है, डेटा प्लान है और उन लोग उसके बेसिस पे अपने डिसीजंस ले रहे हैं, और जिन लोगों के पास फ़ोन नहीं है, बिजली नहीं है, डेटा प्लान नहीं है, उन लोग किस तरह से अपनी बात को आगे रखेंगे, किस तरह से वोट डालेंगे, किस तरह से दिल्ली तक या न्यूयॉर्क तक या वाशिंगटन तक पहुँचेंगे।
So just to translate quickly for our panelists, that Ruchira talked about the WhatsApp groups that are very popular in certain parts of India, and news travels ferociously fast through these WhatsApp groups, and many times this news is wrong and completely, sort of sensational and absolutely wrong, but it spreads like wildfire. And and she talked about the digital divide between those who have these mobile phones and access to this technology and those who don't.
Well, soon everyone will have a cell phone and a smartphone, so I don't think that will be a problem. The problem is the opposite. There is a total information overload. We cannot process it. We get confused, and we are supposed to be interested in every topic in every corner of the world. I'm not going to be interested in everything. So people are looking for answers, and that's what you see politicians with very simple slogans, simplifying the world for us. They are on the march because no one can handle all this information. It's available 24/7 in all channels. TV is of course dying, but we have more than enough new channels. And some of it is fake, some of it is not, and you cannot know what's fake and what's not fake, and you cannot trust the news you get from your friends because they got it from another friend and it was all fake, and so on and so on. So our brains will soon be boiling. And
mine is already boiling. I tell you, as a journalist, I find this overload very hard to deal with. Even for me to decipher what I should cover and what I should ignore is a daily battle. But Pavan, you wanted to come in.
No, I want to say that there is a new form of editorial tyranny also. By that I mean that it's not unusual at all in vibrant democracies, big democracies, for different channels to have a certain bias, a political bias even. Magazines have it, other media instrumentalities have it. But what we are seeing in India, and I'm going back to it because we are the world's largest democracy. The media is a very important pillar of that democracy. Is the principal anchor who has come with a fixed point of view, which then does not become a matter of debate. It becomes a matter of conformity. In other words, you have to either agree or be shouted down, if not by the principal anchor himself or herself, by an entire team of vigilantes sitting with him. So this is now a new situation where the whole tradition, I've been saying this repeatedly. I just finished a book on Adi Shankaracharya and the importance of Shastrarth, of the whole art and craft of debate, where you are willing to listen as much as you wish to argue, where you seek to find a modus vivendi between two opposing points of view, where you are willing and open to the possibility of a synthesis, where, in other words, you don't see everything in terms of irreconcilable opposites, but are willing to discuss it. And let me tell you, half the evolution of much of our civilization, if not much more, has happened through this process of debate and dialogue.
Yeah, but news is not conducive to such sophistication.
Now, this is where I differ with you.
Okay, but let me finish.
But let me answer that question very briefly.
I haven't finished my question. Okay. So,
I shouldn't behave like what I'm criticizing.
News is whatever event that happens in a day that many people would like to know about. It's not synthesis, and it's based on judgment of the editor. And all journalists have inherent biases. I'm not one of those who believes that journalists are objective completely. They are not. We grow up in a society, we bring our biases to the stories we write. It's as simple as that. So that's all I wanted to say.
No, my issue is that I am not for a moment denying the possibility and even the relevance of a bias. By a bias, I mean a certain point of view on a certain situation. You can have it. We are all entitled to it. But I do believe that the dissemination of news must allow different points of view to come into that discussion in order to see which one is more valid, and you can have a situation where you may find that what you believe is right is supported by more people, or you are more forcefully and persuasively able to argue it.
Okay.
But you cannot begin with the premise that either you agree with me, or I'm afraid the chances of your being able to speak are reduced to almost nil. That is something you can't do, even if the nation wants to know.
We don't have a disagreement on that at all. But I wanted to bring in Sujatha. What is your experience of the American media? You live in New York. Do you think the US media are more focused or more fair in the way they cover issues? What's been your experience?
Honestly, I find this discussion on media and its bias rather, it's not touching me much because media is never neutral. Media is never unbiased. It's always biased. And at times, it's more than other times. But other than that, so I don't really put too much stress on media or internet or, fake news or anything like that. I think that what matters is what's going on outside in the streets, the struggle of the people. That's what matters. And fake news, when you participate in outside struggles, you know which one is fake and which one is not fake.
Right. But these struggles have to be reported for people to come to know about them, right? So we can struggle as much as we want, but if we struggle in obscurity, what's the point of the struggle? Then we have to get more people into the struggle, correct?
That's true, but everybody is talking about attacks on Dalits, attacks on Muslims. the various rapes that are taking place in India. But nobody is talking much about the workers' struggle that are going on in India. There are many going on right now in the auto industry, in 3 different auto industries, yeah. And the farmer suicides are happening. And the garment workers, the women, militantly are going on strike. None of this is being reported because biased media will never report class struggles of people. And so I can't expect media in a bourgeois society to be covering everything, without partiality.
Can I say something about that? Please, yeah.
I actually want to add to what Sujatha is saying, which is why I jumped in, is that the other thing is that let's talk about what is not in the 9 o'clock news, because we have a platform. All of you are here, and I would like to emphasize the things that I see missing in the 9 o'clock news, and that is exactly to add to what Sujatha said, the daily struggles of people, but the growing inequality which is deliberately being created in India and the world. And there seems to be a trend where this is being normalized through the 9 o'clock news, whereas the real lived experience of people is different for 24 hours. So the average person today, they are having to do 3 jobs to be able to feed themselves and their families. The average person today has to figure out how they are going to protect even the land they live in. And by the average person, when you shut your eyes, you will probably think of the person you know who's got a pant and a shirt, an apartment and a car. That's not the average person in India. I want you to shut your eyes and think about a person who is really the average if you divide the population of India, and that person has just one garment. Either a one-piece dhoti, one-piece lungi, or one-piece sari, not even a blouse. That person only eats 1 piece of bread a day, and not even vegetables or dal with it, because if they cannot afford it, they eat it with chutney. The working mother leaves that bread and chutney for her children to eat with no childcare, because she has to go and work in a construction site, and she is a migrant from the forests of Madhya Pradesh or Jharkhand, where she has been evicted from the forests because the forests have been taken over by mining companies. That is the daily struggle of a person, and that person is raped because she's sleeping on the sidewalk and then recruited by traffickers and sold into prostitution because she is told you will be able to send some money back home or feed your children, and then finds that she dies within 3 or 4 years because she is bought and sold by 10 men every night. That is the amount of body penetration that that woman will go through. So this is the real story, and this is not reported, and I want to talk about the stories which are not reported. So every time Seema gives me the mic, I'm going to give you a story.
Okay, can I just say, in fairness of our profession, journalists, yes, we're imperfect, and none of us are 100% objective, and we can be tribal in the way that we cover obsessively one particular story. In Britain, we're all obsessed with Brexit. In America, everyone's obsessed with Trump. I'm not sure what you're obsessed with here in India. And I'm sure that a lot of the stories that you talk about
Prime Minister.
do not get covered. But I promise you, as a serious journalist, I've been doing this job for 30 years, that I try to overcome my own biases and subjectivity as much as possible by trying to find out what the story is. What are people telling me? What are they showing me? And I have personally, the program I worked before for the BBC, we have covered the kind of stories that you're talking about, a lot, with a big impact, actually. I remember the first story I did when I went to Asia as a correspondent was about child prostitution in Phnom Penh. The world's oldest profession has become its youngest. That was the line. And there was a big campaign, by the BBC, the Times newspaper ran a big ad, charities got involved. It got noticed. And then the Hun Sen government did a little bit, and then they did very little. We can't change the world. We can just occasionally cast light on certain aspects of it. And there should be more of that. I totally agree. But if we basically say, hold on 1 second, if we say, well, we're all biased, and there's no such thing as objective journalism, we give up the game. But if we're not telling the story, you're going to have to do that yourself. And you might do it really well, and the internet helps you there. But it really helps sometimes to have television and newspapers on your side. And one final point to get to refer to one of the other speakers was saying, we are all entitled to our own opinions, but we are not entitled to our own facts. That is the old, Patrick Moynihan cliche. It's true. And that's where what is happening under Donald Trump is perhaps the most alarming thing. It started with the size of the inauguration crowd, and it goes on to lots of other things. That is what we have to be aware of.
Seema, I just need a sentence. I won't take time, promise.
Okay.
Just to add to what Matt said, that we are entitled to our opinions and not entitled to our facts. But it's hard to know what is fact and opinion. And there's a book I recommend to this audience called Dark Money, which shows how facts have deliberately been manipulated by people with a lot of money, the Koch brothers, the Mercers, who found out what the internet was doing and jumped onto that bandwagon and actually created algorithms understanding our psychology to send us facts in a certain way, half truth, half lies, which would make us think in a certain way.
Right.
I
I think Odd's been my
Okay, I don't watch Indian television, and after listening to this,
It's a great loss for you.
Thank God. But every free society gets the media they deserve. So it's all of you out there and all the other people of India that decides what kind of programs you're watching and what kind of programs you get. So just stop watching it. But there is no way you're going to sit in front of the television and see all these depressive reportage and interviews and so on day after day. No way. You need entertainment, and obviously you get it.
Actually, news is greatly entertaining. In fact, now if you switch off if you put it on mute, and you have 8 boxes of relatively unknown, nearly apoplectic panelists, each of them who are speaking at the same time. It's quite entertaining by itself to watch this. But essentially what is happening is different. The story that Ruchira said, even if a small aspect of it is brought on television, or if the story that she can speak about the institutionalized discrimination continuing as in the past for centuries against Dalits is brought. So in the case of women, the answer will not be to take cognizance of the fact of the story, but a counter will be how successful the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign is. If, for instance, you mention that Dalits and Muslims have been lynched on the suspicion of transporting illicit beef and killed in public, the answer usually may be, and I've been a part of such debates, is to say that the IMF is saying that India will now grow at 7.7% annually. So it's not as if the questions cannot be raised, it is the manner in which they are discussed which brings about the complete, it's like a surreal replay of the black and white polarities where you are not going to the substance of the issue.
Right.
This is the real problem.
Okay, I think it's time to open up the debate to the audience, and the gentleman with the hat. We'll come to you. Just be patient.
I'm a big fan of Pavan Varma ji, and in these days of always towing the party line, he's one guy who is aloof and who always has his own mind. So I'm a big fan. But I have a question to ask him. Sir, don't you think that when we talk about intolerance in today's times, all these incidents of, Dalits being lynched or the riots happening earlier, before 2014, they were very much happening earlier also. And they were clear caste bias. So it has nothing to do with the party who is in power. It has everything to do with the social status, which has to definitely improve. Secondly, one more question.
Can you keep it short, please? Because we want to give others a chance.
And one more last question is that all these power brokers, the problem they have is that politics has turned upside down. Earlier, the way of science of winning elections was getting the minorities in the fold. But now, after the 2014, that has been turned upside down. Now you don't need those minority appeasement. So maybe majority appeasement is happening. That is troubling these power brokers who used to have this.
Thank you.
No, I think that it's not as if intolerance began with 2014, just like it's not that economic progress began with 2014. However, what has happened is a new phenomenon, and I tell you, we all have faced it in different ways. If I disagree with you, earlier I could be abused. I could even be accused of not being perhaps rightly oriented intellectually. Now I'm called anti-national. You have to understand what it means, how the act of sedition is being invoked. In other words, as I said somewhere else, there are people who carry a metaphorical syringe with them. And the moment you disagree with them, they want a sample of your blood to see how much nationalism you have. And to check it out. And that is something new. Because don't doubt my bona fides. Don't doubt my patriotism. Don't doubt my rights under the Constitution as a citizen. I may agree to disagree with you. As far as minority appeasement is, I agree with you. There were excesses in the past, where minorities were used as vote banks deliberately without anything substantive being done to improve their situation. We need to correct that. But we don't need to exclude the minorities in an institutional manner, as for instance happened in the UP elections, where not a single seat was given to the Muslims in UP. And I can name 4 other states in the entire list, for instance, of the BJP's MPs and MLAs, which is somewhere around 1,300 something. There are 4 Muslim MLAs. There's something wrong in this.
There certainly is, yes. Okay, the gentleman at the back. Yeah, okay.
My question, hello, can you hear me? My question is to Sujatha. First of all, her statement that the Muslims are on the verge of being wiped out, to say the least, is stunning and preposterous.
No, please,
one minute.
Let him ask the question.
Yeah. This is the answer to her statement. She should see with context to 1947, where there were 20 million Hindus. Today, there are only 2 million. On the other side, there are 20 million Muslims, and today they have grown to 250 million. Now she has to decide, or she has to think, who is going to be exterminated.
Okay, what is the question, sir?
The question is, what is the basis of a statement that the Muslims will be exterminated?
What is the basis of saying that Muslims are discriminated and attacked? 2002 Gujarat violence, where Modi, the butcher of Gujarat, killed all these Muslims. That is the basis of it.
Okay. The lady here in the front, in the 3rd row.
You did? Okay. Here, let's look around.
When we talk about the 9 o'clock news and the primetime news, do you think we as viewers have ourselves to blame by watching this news that we don't even like and increasing the TRPs, while if we don't watch it, we could actually force the news channels to put better news out there?
There's a masochistic trait in us. There's a masochistic trait in us where we love to see the anchor and a few of his henchmen reduced to pulp somebody on the panel. We enjoy the process. When we get tired of that particular channel, we see if there is a better fight scene on another channel.
Okay. The girl at the back, yeah, in white.
Hi, a very quick question. So Matt Frei mentioned about his kids who are usually using telephones for their information, and Sujatha ma'am mentioned Dark Money, the book. So now this, as a young person, this is more relatable to me because I'm anyway not watching the 9 o'clock television. So what is the takeaway for people like me who are well informed, who have access to information? Then how do I make sure that I'm getting the right news and right opinion? As a young person, I already know about what's Muslim rights, the Dalit problem. I know all of it, but how do I do it intelligently as a young person? Thank you.
Can I ask?
So the question was, how do you get intelligent news? Right. Yeah. How do you find it? Well, I mean, you got to look for it, but it's out there. You know, and you can concoct your daily bespoke menu of news. You can, you know, dabble with the New York Times, delve into the Wall Street Journal to get the opposite opinion if you're in America, then maybe go over to the Financial Times, then you might come back to the Daily Mail for a little bit of celeb news, then go into the, you know, a whole selection of Indian newspapers. But how much time do you have? You know, do you have a job? Do you have kids? Do you go to school, university? I mean, that's the problem. There is only so much time.
The burden on the reader has, you know, increased tremendously. I'll tell you what I do. I read a couple of newspapers on the right, a couple of newspapers on the left, and there are certain websites I trust, and I go to them, and then I synthesize. I mean, it's, you know, it's a task.
One encouraging thing. If you are worried that you're not getting enough news, if you have that fear, chances are you're already getting it. Right? Because you have a curious mind, you have a searching mind, and you probably have access to much more news than you think you do.
You're already way ahead, my friend.
Yeah.
I think one more advice I would give you is to, you know, think about stories that you have trusted in the past and who wrote them, what the sources were, and maybe go back to them. And I can give you one tip to at least decipher the Indian fake news. You can read alt news, which is coming out by a man called Pratik Sinha from Gujarat. And he is actually analyzing all the fake news and telling us which is fake, how is it fake, and what is the right story. So that could help you if you're looking at news from the internet. Look at alt news.
Okay, we have a question in the front row, Vinod.
My question is solemn. It may not sound serious, but it is serious. And it's a very fairly serious question in the sense that when the title must have been chosen, not the 9 o'clock news, were the Indian participants aware that it's under the aegis of Z News, and the 9 o'clock at Z News is called DNA, conducted by a certain editor, Sudhir Chaudhary. So did the Indian participants have this in mind?
अब फेस्टिवल के स्पॉन्सर्स के बारे में क्या बोले, इसलिए बाद में कभी आपसे विवादित स्थल पे मिलके इसके बारे में बात करूँगा।
मुझे पता था और मुझे लगा कि फिर भी हमें एक मौका मिल रहा है, एक प्लेटफॉर्म मिल रहा है, तो हमें जो भी प्लेटफॉर्म मिले आज एक डायलॉग करने का, उसको हमें लेना चाहिए, बोलना चाहिए, और जो भी स्पॉन्सर करे और जो भी 9 बजे बोले वो तो हमें पता ही है कि जी न्यूज़ में क्या बोला जा रहा है और चैनल्स में भी क्या बोला जा रहा है, तो उसके हम एक दूसरे से मिल के जो बात कर सकते हैं वो ज़रूरी है कि उसको हम कायम रखें.
So you have to struggle where you can, say where you can, what you can, right? And hope that the discourse will go in the right direction. Okay, this gentleman in the blue. No.
Hello, guys. I had 2 questions, but I'll just ask one. All right. My question is to Pavan sir. And I think you can answer this very correctly. Now, I urge all the people, all the religiously sentimental people to please calm down for a while. Whenever we talk of that, yeah, all right, I'm asking that question, ma'am. So you said you used the word suspicion of having beef, right?
So that word suspicion has a connotation that, it somehow tells us that, we must not lynch a person in suspicion, but, if he may have it, we are, we are eligible to do something like that. So why do you think we use that word suspicion? Why don't we say that, anyone who wants to eat a particular kind of meat, whose religion does not prohibit him to eat that, we should be cool about it, right? India is not about Hinduism, India is about the entire religion.
Let me just clarify. When I said that people are killing people on the basis of suspicion, I was not glorifying suspicion. I was pointing a finger straight at the kind of times we are living in, where even on the basis of unfounded suspicion, people think they can take the law into their own hands with impunity and with the feeling that the state is backing them. That's what I was trying to say to you.
The lady in the second row, here.
Hello, very worthy panel. I hope I'm not entirely wrong in understanding the title 9 o'clock news as the proverbial 9 o'clock. Not really, it doesn't have to be 9, 10, 11, whatever, but that which is most highlighted and not that is most highlighted, but should be. And I'm then wanting to point a finger or wanting to dwell at the real crisis, which is perhaps even mirrored slightly in the form of this panel, which starts with a very worthy title, which is to say, why are we not talking about things which should be talked about, but then goes back slowly, tapers into talking about the form and the 9 o'clock and so on. So is it this that we are really struggling with? We know what's burning, we know what's out there, but it's so difficult to talk about that we get stuck with form.
We just can't help ourselves. That's the point you're making, and I'm very, very aware of what you're saying. I tried that we discuss issues and not necessarily the bad points of the media or the failures of the media, but I take your point.
Actually, not the 9 o'clock news was a program on British television, I think back in the, as you may all know, which was satirizing the news. Not so much dealing with things that weren't in the news, but just making fun of the stuff that was in the news. And it was hilariously funny and very cruel most of the time.
Okay. This gentleman in the black.
Ma'am, my question is to Ma'am Sujatha. First of all, it was amazing that you shared your experience working with sex workers, underage sex workers, and forced sex labor. So one of the things I would like to ask you, in the Indian context at least, we all know that legalized markets are always safer and always a better solution to work in. We have those in the Scandinavian countries. We have those in the countries that have the best living standards in the world. So do you think in the Indian context, sex work should be legalized?
That's me. He said Sujatha.
I think your question was meant for Ruchira.
That's fine. It's okay. Actually, that is the other problem with the 9 o'clock news is the language of politics. Because for years, I've been struggling with the anchor people and editors of newspapers to say, do not use the term sex worker, because there is nothing which should be legitimized in prostitution as work. It is inherently exploitative. It is based on something called body penetration, body invasion, and it has physical and mental health consequences which are devastating. So no amount of unionizing or whatever legalizing of pimping and brothel keeping will ever take away the consequences of body invasion. And all labor struggles over the years have asked for work which is both sustainable, dignified, and prostitution is neither sustainable nor dignified because a woman gets diseases, she gets psychosocial trauma. Research is proving that women in prostitution get more psychosocial trauma than returning war vets. And also it is not dignified because her body is being negotiated every time. It's a body which is on sale, and body penetration has huge consequences. She suffers from out-of-body experiences. So if we accept prostitution as work, we are likely to accept other forms of exploitation also as work as the years go by and actually reduce a very fundamental thing, a question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is the nature of livelihood?
I think there is a correction that Odd would like to make
yes,
to the question.
There is no legalization of prostitution in Scandinavia. Rather the opposite, because after the Me Too campaign, there will be a law passed in Sweden and Norway where you need an expressly consent in order to have sex. And this would be a very strange law, but I can say that the effect is that the population of Scandinavia will decline.
Okay, so unfortunately we've run out of time. If any of the speakers would like to make a one-sentence summing up, something you want the audience to go away with? No.
Thank you.
Okay. That was short and sweet. Okay. Thank you very much. And, oh, sorry.
I just want to say that think of the last girl. Shut your eyes and imagine the 13-year-old in the brothel. And think about the fact that she does not have a phone or a data app. She does not have access to television, not even a landline. And what kind of news does she receive? And how are we going to change the fact that she receives no news which is of any use to her?
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it.
A big round of applause for Matt Frei, Harald Hauge, Pavan Varma, Ruchira Gupta, Sujatha Gidla, and Seema Sirohi.